Welcome to the show today. Today I have Andrej Golob on the show, and he's the Managing Director of Switzerland at Xerox and board member at Raiffeisen Schweiz, Switzerland. So super excited to talk to you today in these crazy times. I think the topic that we're going to dive into today is going to be really interesting. Super excited to hear your story as well. So welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Daniel. Glad to be here. Glad I made it, and as you said, in this very particular time. But I think this belongs as well to this time, that we stick to some routines and to the agenda, and not that every day, you do completely something which is just in the escalation mode.
Absolutely agree with that. Yes, some stability in the chaos is always good. So talk to me a bit more about your story. I'm super curious about, just in a couple of pointers, in a couple of minutes, like what is the story that got you from, from the beginning to sort of like where you are today?
Maybe I start with university. I studied in St. Gallen Business Administration. And actually, it starts a bit earlier. When I was at high school, my colleagues, were talking about what are their plans for university, what they're interested in. And we had in the high school in Alton, we had in the library, we had boxes about different professions. And actually, I wanted to become a manager, and I was looking for a box there which said manager, but there was none. And no, I didn't want to become a manager, what I'm today, but I was thinking more of being the manager of Tina Turner or the Rolling Stones or something like that. So someone who is organizing things and promoting things and make it bigger and take responsibility. But at that time, as I said, I was linking it more to a group like the Rolling Stones or to Tina Turner. So I figured out that there's not a profession like that, but the thing that got nearest to that was studying business administration. That's what I did. After finishing St. Gallen, I went on a trip around the world, came back home, and by accident ended up in HB. I didn't know anything about HB except the calculators that we used at high school and university. And somehow, I found it a cool company, American company, everything. All the people that I met in the interviews were cool. They were really hands-on. They felt to be a good team, and I signed up at HB, and I was doing an entry-level job in controlling, and with that, I was in contact with all the business leaders of HB Switzerland at that time. So the business leaders which were part of the managing board. And they have been really, for me, I was looking at them and thought, wow, one day, I want to have a job like them, be a business leader, be the owner or the responsible guy of a business unit or of a country GM. This was really like my big ambition that I had at that time. A few weeks, or not few weeks, a few years later, I was working hard on that. I did several jobs in Switzerland. I was in Austria, responsible for Eastern Europe, out of Vienna, came back to Switzerland, and always kept this goal in my mind. And 9 years later, I really became the business unit manager of the PC business in Switzerland. Right at the time when HB took over Compaq, I had the chance to lead this business in Switzerland. Then I thought, okay, what's now? 9 years later, I'm there, what I had in mind, and achieved my ambition. And I think over time you realize as well that it's not what you first think, what your goal in your life is. It's not just a role, it's not the title. I think when I started, it was more this title, this having this position, but then you realize that actually this is not the most important thing. But what gets more important is then how you contribute. How can you contribute to an organization? How you can lead a team more effectively? How to make it a bigger team, a better team, big in the sense of better. And you realize as well that it's not only about a position, but it's a time that you stay with a group of people that you have the privilege to lead. And during this period, you can make something, you can contribute in the journey to this team, to the business, and be part of it for a while, but then let it go. And while you let it go, you want to have it sustainable, so that it's not something that is just for the next end of the quarter or year end. But I realized, that for me, it's really important, is the sustainability of what I'm doing. I did that, by just, by intuition, but over time I realized, that this is really what is driving me. So after HP, after almost 19 years HP, I then changed and became CEO of a daughter company of Swisscom, which was a great change because after being more in the execution role in an American company, I was CEO and had with that, all the strategic responsibility as well of a smaller company with 500 people. So this was giving me, as well more bandwidth that I could do a bit more impact as well, or a lot of impact. And it was really a great time. 5 years was doing that, and again, it was leading people, especially at that time, through transformation. How do you bring people? At that time, it was people from Swisscom and the company that they have acquired. How you bring two cultures together, a small, medium-sized company with its own culture, and on the other side, a corporate culture like Swisscom, and to create something new was really a great experience, and for me, something extremely interesting. With these 5 years, I think, made me feel more, or gave me a better understanding of dynamics in an organization. That you're not only the leader in front of the people, that you motivate, and that you are the one who is driving the system. But at that time, I learned a lot, about working on a system, not be part of the system. In HP, I was really, the fast rabbit, that is executing faster and working with the organization, that everyone becomes faster. But I think leadership is as well, that you're not only the best in the execution, but you start realizing, how to work on the system and not in the system. And I think this is still something today, that is giving me a different insight and differentiated view on organizations that I'm working with. After Swisscom, I changed the industry for a while and went to the financial service industry, became the CEO of a spin-off of UBS, Equatex, was doing special or share plan administration for big companies, so companies that do have equity plans for their employees, and you need a bank that is administering that. And Equatex was doing that for big blue chip companies around the world. And we were doing a spin-off of UBS. It was extremely challenging time, because you create a startup, but at the same moment, that you go live, you have 1.5 million of clients on your platform, and you are in different jurisdictions in the US, in UK, and in Switzerland, and at the same time you have billions of assets at the very first moment. So you are a startup, but at the same time, all the regulators tell you, hey, you better you better make it work from day one, and you don't have a sandbox where you first start and test and all of that. So this experience, the CEO role was extremely interesting, but working with private equity, I realized that that the more you have been working together, the view of the company was getting, and what has to be done was getting apart. Private equity wants at one point in time to sell the company. And for me, my gut feeling always told me, it's about the employees, it's about the clients of this company, it's about the values of the company. This was for me at the end more important than just, to make it beautiful and sell it. And I think this was the moment for me to realize, that this is not what I'm interested in doing, and we separated, and I created my own company, Carl Digital. Carl Digital is helping other companies in big transformations, and I was using my experience, not my consulting skills, but my managerial experience, my leadership from the past in driving through big transformations, what went well, what didn't went well, to take that and help other companies in big transformations. That's how I ended up at Xerox, from a mandate to discuss and help them in the transformation that Xerox is in. At the end, we realized that actually I would be a good fit for the country manager role, and as well for the board in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, in helping them to develop the business further. And I accepted this offer, and this is where I am. There's a little as well to talk about Raiffeisen, but I think this is maybe we can touch later on other leadership roles, and not executive roles, but non-executive roles, like serving on a board of a company.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. You touched on a lot of points already that I wanted to go into. So it's great that you kind of like put a lot of insights and inputs already into this initial piece. And one of them is, lessons learned, and also talking about, what drives you, a little bit more talking about the purpose. I want to specifically go more into the question of why, specifically today, not necessarily the very early beginning of your career, because I think, ambitions and motivations do change over time. But I'm much more curious about today. What is it, if you look at what you're doing today, what you're involved in, what you're engaged in, what is it that gets you up every morning?
Bringing organizations further. It's really, what drives me, what motivates me. I think, of an organization as a system, as a complex system, that is today in a current state, and how to make the system better and improve it. I think this is really the challenge that I love, and that motivates me. This is really, what I think as well, from a theoretical perspective, understanding an organization or a company, as an organization, as a system, and then you try, to improve this system. But at the same time, it's always it's the people behind. One is, let's say, more the theoretical stuff, the system. But then, what motivates me, what gives me energy, are the people that you have to deal with, and that is great to deal with. I think this is the combination of the two.
It's interesting. On one side, if I try to summarize it, on one side, it's like basically growing and transforming an organization, or as you call it, the system, basically. And on the other side, enabling the people to actually, create and grow and transform themselves, I guess, and the system as well. So it's really an interesting combination and an interesting drive. On the one side, it's growth, I would say, and on the other side, kind of like, I guess, enablement is a word, or empowerment, or whatever you want to put into that. What I'm also really curious about is, I mean, you had a lot of, I would say, different experiences. I mean, from being an executive in a very, very large American organization, to becoming CEO, to becoming CEO of a spin-off, and dealing with different industries as well, dealing with different regulations, different sizes of organizations, complexities. If we would just take one thing for the moment, what would you say is one of the most important lessons along the way that you learned in your career?
Probably it's listen to your inner voice. Is this gut feeling that is so important. At the end, you can make complex analysis, discuss in length, strategies, what needs to be done, and all of that, and analyze the pros and cons of an option, and decide on something. I think what it really is important is that you follow your gut feeling. And first time I realized that was when I took on the role as the head of the PC business in HP, just after the HP Compaq merge. All the new leaders, executives, have been invited to the US, and we got 3-day introduction in, look, this is the new company, this is how it is organized, this is your role, this is your cookbook. Now go back to your country, build the team, build the management team, build the organization, drive the results. Next quarter is in 2.5 months ahead, so deliver the results. And the charter was, within 1 week to build the management team. And you think, hey, it's not possible. How can you select, all the leaders that are needed for such a business from an organization that you know and from an organization that you don't know? I didn't know anyone from Compaq. And typically you would go and do all the interviews, and you would have different people that would interview them, and at the end you would make a common decision. But if you have, to build your whole management team within 1 week, there's no way in doing that. But it is really then, the gut feeling that you have, after a few moments, in an interview, identifying, yes, this is a person, that you trust in. Maybe it's not everywhere, the perfect fit, but it is this trust, that is helping you then to select those people. So that's one example of many different processes and decisions at the end that you have to take, where we, as leaders, we pretend very often, that we make very, very rational decisions, but at the end, it's so important that you follow as well this inner voice, and I think that you as well that you try as well to make it simple and get the simpler decisions, which are often the better. So don't make it too complicated.
I love that that lesson, and I appreciate you saying that, because I think it is generally harder for some reason to actually listen to a gut feeling than to analytical data. I guess we're we humans often tell ourselves that we are rational animals, which is not much of a case, actually. We're quite emotional animals, actually. So I very much appreciate you sharing that. It's a really interesting lesson. And what I also want to talk about is, or what I want to go deeper into is the topic of leadership, the topic of change, the topic of transformation. Because, when big change happens, may that be a merge, may that be, big strategy change, may that be a transformation, may that be what we're having right now as a situation. If big change happens, there's a lot of uncertainty. Very often, we had a plan from A to B, and now suddenly we don't even know if we still have B or if B is still called B. So what I'm really curious about is in times of big change, first of all, from a leadership perspective, how do you approach a situation? How do you even tackle a situation like that? What are some of the questions that you ask yourself, or some of the thinking that you're going through?
Maybe I'm not sure if there's a difference or not. Big change, sometimes a big change can be planned. You can plan for a big transformation of a company, that you go from A to B. Probably we should concentrate on this one. At the moment, we lead as well through uncertainty with COVID-19 crisis, which is something that we haven't been prepared for. That is not just, going from, well, it's as well, going through this crisis, and there is a lot of uncertainty. But let's focus maybe on the first part, where there is, let's say, a clear view what B is going to be. Yes. I think there, for me, it is important, that that the B is not something, that is just a number. So you want to grow from X revenues to Y revenues, but that it is more that there is, let's say, this system that I mentioned before, that you have a view on how are things going to look after that? What is it that you want to change? So is it what is the strategy going to be? So is it a strategic change that you want to have? Is it introducing a new technology, and with that, maybe new business models, and that you do that? Or is it, and maybe a combination of all of that, including a cultural change? And I think that's what I believe, is I try, to bring all of that together, and I do keep a lot of attention on the cultural change. I strongly believe, that executing on a strategy without changing the culture, without changing the system, as I mentioned before, and working with the people and the attitude and all of that, you will not achieve to the end, what you have been aiming for in a transformation. And I think, transformation means, that you're transforming as well as individuals, as an organization, during this period. Which brings me then to the topic: how do I lead in these times? Is I do pay a lot of attention. How do I act? How do people see me? They will test me. Do I believe in it? Am I open and honest? Do I live, the values that I consider as being key values as well let's say, in the state that you want to achieve? And I think this is, one part, and the other part is that I'm trying, I have like my own compass that is leading me, what you want always to achieve is, you want to become more agile, you want to become more innovative, you want to increase the leadership skills, and you want the people engaged. And in these 4 dimensions, on the way, while you're transforming, you work on the leadership skills of your team. You work on the engagement level so that you increase the engagement level, especially in transformation times. How can you, what are the barriers that you have put in place, in the past that disengage the people? How can you get them back and then, become part of the team? Not watching, how me or the few ones are doing the transformation, but they become part of the transformation. On the innovation side, really as well be transparent, that not everything will be perfect, but that we will fail. Talk about failures, and as well be honest, and say, I don't know everything, and we are going to try and test and fail, and then we go again, and but don't pretend, that you exactly know, what needs to be done, and there is only one way of doing things. I think this will help as well. While you go through it, that you build on the ability to innovate within the organization, within the company, and then the agility, and coming maybe back, to the topic, of COVID-19. I mean, this is the extreme case, and you see then limitations of big corporations like Xerox is, HP or Swisscom would be many of these companies, or Raiffeisen. Typically, if you looked at responses from other companies, that came with offers, that you can provide help for companies, for employees working from home and things like that, and agile companies, it took them 2-3 days, and then you could see first offerings on the market. And for big corporations, it takes weeks, and you have still not everything in place because you are hierarchical organized, you have too many decision levels, you are just slow, and all of that. And I think this is something, that in a big transformation as well, you need to try continuously, to become more agile and reduce these barriers.
A couple of things I want to mention. The first thing is that what I really like is that you pointed out the importance of self-awareness, I think, when you talked about the way that people look at you and the way that people will test you and things like that. I think the topic of self-awareness there is really interesting, because on one side it's sort of like, okay, there's certain values you talked about in terms of what you want to create, and then in terms of basically walking the path and staying in integrity and staying truthful to that along the way, and not losing sight of that basically no matter what happens. So that I really appreciate a lot. And then also in terms of engagement, that's a really interesting one as well, because it's kind of like, doesn't matter what kind of change you want to make, if people are not on board, it's never going to happen anyway. So engagement is such a huge topic, I believe, in everything, in every change, in every transformation, in anything that basically goes or is moving. It doesn't even have to change. It's just anything that is moving, I guess. Engagement is so key. That's something I'd like to just get one more point of input from you on. How do you have or keep or re-engage people in a change? How do you get people to be engaged, stick with you, not just watch from the sidelines, but actually be part and drive?
What I love to do is, put bottom-up special teams in place, that are driving, inputs, driving projects, really bottom-up. So not only, let's say, have your own projects and initiatives that need to be done, and then have people, that fill somewhere a box, and that's it. But to come up with the challenge that you have, the challenge can be, how to grow revenues in a particular space, where you see, a decline, and you have to stop the decline. And typically, what you would ask or do as a CEO, you go and ask your sales manager, immediately stop that. So this would be the top-down approach. For me, really in this engagement is get, a bunch of people from different departments together, help them to come together as a team. So how to collaborate, what kind of tools and methods that you have. So you help them like a facilitator, you give them a facilitator or you do it on your own, but that they feel comfortable, that they understand what is their charter. Okay, this is the challenge. We can come with ideas, and then so you help them to go through this process, and you you get the first results. You go back and try to improve. So the team improves or comes with second cycle, third cycle, and with that, it's not anymore you, but it's like a first engaged team, that is driving that. And then we start multiplying that, because other will watch them and then realize, hey, they have fun, and they have as well, they feel engaged and empowered, and something is happening, and cool ideas come out of that, and you start executing on it. And then you start talking about that, you start multiplying about this, that it's not only one or two challenges, but you can have multiple challenges that you give into the organization in such kind of teams that are working on that. And I think what's important there for me is, that it's always like a combination between top-down challenges, so that you define what are the strategic initiatives and the strategic questions that you have, and that you give this to teams, that bottom up can work on that. And I think this is for me the ideal combination.
I really like that, because it sort of like goes in the direction of basically planting the seed that can then grow like bottom up, so to say, and then also spread across the organization. Very, very great insights. Thank you for that. There's one more aspect I have of that, which is, always a topic, which is how do you hire the best people? What I mean by that is not how do you find them or how do you advertise jobs or anything like that. I'm more interested in how do you know if somebody is a great fit? How do you know if somebody is the best person to hire for you? Like, how do you know?
Probably it's have someone that shares the same vision on the topic, so not the experience. Yes, I've done that, 10 times, here is in my CV, I can prove, that I did this, and this. I think, this is at the end, can be so different, one organization from the other, why sometimes you achieve these results and why sometimes you won't. But what is more important is, that you have someone that is interested to understand what is it really that I want to achieve. With the interest, you realize as well, they understood, or this person has understood, what it is about, and then you can very soon you figure out, is there a good fit, that both share the same common view on what needs to be done, what needs to be accomplished. And if you have this feeling, then I think, this is the best, for me, the best fit, because then you don't need to go into the details, what is exactly the job role and responsibilities and all of that, because very often you don't know it. Or even if you know it today, in 1 month, it will change. And so you need to have something bigger that where there is common sense on that.
Yeah, I really like that, in terms of the alignment, because I feel like what you said in terms of do you have the same view or a similar view on what needs to be done, that also gives you an indication that working together is probably going to be not completely seamless, but more seamless than not, because You're not going to suddenly end up and go like what are you doing? That's a really interesting one. Then in terms of job descriptions, that's an interesting one too, because there's a job description, somebody joins the company and a month later you're like, how does that, why does that not fit anymore? Because things are just so fluid these days. Last question I have for you, which is, let's imagine you're 80 years old now and you're sitting in your rocking chair and you're looking back at your life and you're thinking about, okay, the journey that you had, and you're looking at the change that has happened in the business world, maybe in the world itself. At that point, when you're there looking back, what is a change that you would want to see happening in the world?
Would want to see that there is more integrity, that there is more trust, so that you don't build organizational political systems, that have to deal with mistrust because you don't have the trust. You put so many controls and special organization in place that are just, controlling them and telling you if things are happening as you want. This is, at the end, it's useless. It's not bringing you any further. It's just waste. I think if there is integrity, people are honest, and if with that, we see, the trust growing. I think this will be better organizations, better, can be companies, but it can be as well, let's say, countries or human being overall. I think it would make our lives less political, and we could spend more time, on what is really relevant.
I love that. I love that piece of integrity and trust, specifically in the way that you described it. Having less waste, I like that a lot, because I think there's enough of that right now. There's a lot to get rid of, I feel. And what I find interesting in times that we are going through right now is there's a lot of waste that we are now finally seeing. Because before it was easy also to close our eyes and say, it's not waste, come on. And now it's sort of like, well, maybe it wouldn't hurt to be a little bit more lean. That's a really interesting one. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your insights, your story. We're going to link below this video also to some resources like your LinkedIn profile, so people can also connect and exchange and say what they liked about the conversation. So thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate having you in the show.
Thank you too.